Hi everyone, again, thank you so much for joining today. We're going to do a slimming webinar. This time we're actually going to focus on areas outside of the belly where we normally focus, but we get a lot of requests on how to do slimming on the inner thighs, how to do slimming on the arms, how you might modulate and change your technique based on a different sized area. So we're going to do a little bit of a demo on that today. I have muted you guys as you come on the line. The reason is we want to keep the audio consistent for everyone. So the chat channel that is available, you should see a Zoom group chat. Feel free to ask questions as we go along in there. We'll also stop at various points and ask for questions. So make sure you're kind of on it and can submit your questions there. Without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Delaney, who's going to lead the session today.
All right, perfect. And if you guys just want to let us know if you can see, I think Molly might still be, oh, here we go. Perfect. Is it, I think it's that so that should be better. Let me know in the chat if you guys can't hear me. I'm going to try to speak especially loud today because I know we've had some audio issues in the past. But we're just kind of going to roll into it. Again, a lot of this is going to be visual. So we're going to be just kind of walking through some of the other body parts. Like Molly said, it's going to be inner thigh today. So we're just going to do a half of the session, right? So we're just going to do the one leg just in the interest of time. Then we're going to roll into an arm slimming session as well. So just to give you guys a little bit of an idea, I know that we've focused a lot on the stomach and the abdomen, which is really important. It is going to be your most popular area, but definitely, you know, the second most popular areas are generally going to be the inner thighs and the arms. We're going to demo those today. So first things first, when you're going to do an inner thigh slimming, is you want to measure, of course, as with any slimming session. Inner thighs, obviously a little different from measuring the abdomen because you don't have the belly button as a reference point. And so what I like to do is I like to find a beauty mark that I can consistently measure around. If the client doesn't have a beauty mark, the best thing you can do is, before you even get them on the table, have them stand up and hold their hands down by their sides and then just make a little mark on the outer edge of their thigh where you're going to be measuring around, just so that you know it's going to be consistent. So our model today has a beauty mark that I can use perfectly on the outer edge of the thigh. And so I'm going to go ahead and measure it the same way I would for the abdomen. So I'll just have them lift up the leg and then just release the leg down. I'm going to measure right around the lower edge of that beauty mark. So you definitely want to make sure that when you're measuring these areas that the measuring tape is going across the denser area that you're going to be focusing on. And so here I see that it's right there. I'm going to go ahead and just measure again loosely, not pulling too tight, but again, not too loose. So at a nice top measurement, she is 22.5 inches around this thigh. With the thighs and the arms, any limbs that you're doing, of course, you're going to want to take the measurement before and after for each leg or each arm because we are dominant in one of our limbs, and so the measurement is going to be slightly different. We said 22. Yeah. So in order to prep the body for the slimming session, we're going to take one of our fragrance-free baby wipes. We're going to warn them that it's going to be a little cold. We're just going to wipe off the entire area. So this is just going to help to clean any lotions, oils, natural oils, sweat off the surface of the skin, just giving us a clean surface to work with here. And you can see that how I got my model ready for treatment is I had them put on, we have these sort of Velcro skirts that they can put on just so that they feel a little bit more comfortable with the draping. You can also feel free to drape them a bit more if you want to add on a towel or anything like that. But you know, for us today, we're just using this Velcro skirt. So what we'll do next is we're gonna take a nice pump of gel in the non-dominant hand. So again, when I say pump of gel, I mean a nice full pump here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go onto my machine. We're using the 3.0 here, but if you're using the 2.0, it's just gonna be the body slimming setting under F2. If you're using the 3.0, as you guys know, it's personalized, so we're gonna go into program, we're gonna go into woman, and then we're gonna select the thigh slimming setting, right? So we'll hit enter there. And then it brings us to our program page. You'll take the wand in your dominant hand. So for me, I'm right-handed. I'm gonna take the wand in my right hand, and I'm gonna go ahead and press play with my other finger. On the heat setting, as you guys know, really important that you deposit the gel and use the wand to glide it out. So you see, I almost set the gel down in a pile, and then I use the wand to move it around the area that I'm dealing with, right? So because the inner thigh is a bit more of a sensitive area for most people, I'm following with my hand, but I'm following with it behind the wand, right? So I'm really letting the wand lead. Hold on a second. Nope, nothing's changed on our end. I'm showing sound on my computer, like I'm actually seeing the microphone moving up as I'm speaking. Okay, perfect. And so as I mentioned, when I'm doing the heat sequence, I'm really letting the wand guide the way. So you do want to make sure that on the inner thigh slimming, you're sticking to the relatively small area that's really high up on the inner thigh. So again, it is a sensitive area. It is definitely an area that, you know, some women will prefer to have female practitioners for. Other women, you know, won't care as much, but it's sort of nice to have the option in those cases. But really just wanting to stay in a zone that's comfortable for the client while also ensuring that we're really reaching the majority of the density of mass. Also keep in mind, if the audio is a little tricky for you, we are recording this webinar, so you guys will be able to review it at any time on the box drive as soon as it's uploaded, which it should be later today. So, you know, if anything ever cuts out, just know that you'll be able to review it again. And so you can see I am sticking to a relatively small area here. That's because the inner thigh has such a density of mass that typically you'll need pretty much the full session in this area to get the desired results, right? So you heard the 3 beeps. That's signifying we're going to move over to the cold portion of the cycle. I'm going to take another pump of gel and just apply it to this area that I'm working on. And as with any body edge, what I'm really gonna do here, technique-wise, is I'm gonna use the wand from underneath, scoop up, and use my opposing hand to create that tension, right? And so by doing this, I'm really lifting up from underneath, and I'm really getting those hills in the area where I'm really working with the most density. It also actually eases up a little bit of the tension that's normally on the wrist and the hands. So you're actually able to perform this a little bit easier than something like the abdomen, where it is at sort of more of a scooping pressure across a flat surface as opposed to really getting this edge on your side. So you can see here that I'm never going over the same stroke twice, but I am just only subtly moving, right? Really important to note, and something that I've been trying to really note as much as I can recently, is the ideal temperature range. So we're going to talk on that a little bit as well, because we have had some questions about it. So in terms of slimming session, you should always keep the wand anywhere between +4 and -4 on the cold cycle. So the way that you're able to monitor this, and the way that you're supposed to be monitoring this throughout every slimming session, is in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. You'll see that there's a live temperature graph, right? That's changing based on your speed, on your technique. That live temperature graph on the x-axis is going to say temperature applicator, and then it's going to give a temperature. And so that's the temperature that you're looking at. So the point of confusion that comes is that there is also a temperature that's listed in the top right corner. It's not a live temperature graph, right? So it's not changing. That's the temperature that the wand itself is set to at absolute peak, but the skin temperature, which is the skin temperature that's being read on the graph, should never reach that, right? So the skin temperature always should be staying between +4 and -4, because if you start to exceed -4, you're gonna run the risk of extended numbness, you're gonna run the risk of irritation, especially on the inner thighs, whereas actually on the left inner thigh, you have a major artery that runs through there. It can actually be something that becomes dangerous. So you really want to be careful. You really want to be looking at your temperature the whole time that you're performing a slimming, and that's why I always recommend keeping the machine so close to you, right? So you can see here from the way my wand is, that my machine is right next to me. I've got a lot of slack on the hose. There's not a lot of tension there. And I'm able to really easily and quickly refer back to the temperature so that I know if I need to switch up my technique, right?
Delaney, can you talk a little bit to whether they can go below -4?
So you cannot go below -4. If, say, you drop below -4 for, a minute, it's not necessarily going to be, the end-all be-all, but I would just say be very, very cautious. And really, if you are reaching that sort of -4, -5 zone, start to extend your gesture a little bit. So sometimes with people who are smaller in mass or just people who run a bit colder in general, you might find that you are reaching lower temperatures, in which case that's a signal that you're able to sort of extend and broaden your area a little bit. So for example, let's say at this point, which we're not there, we're at -1, so we're in a good range. But let's say that this model started to drop into the -4, pushing -5 range. What I would do is I would simply just move my technique and start in an area that has more body heat so that I don't just do sort of an overkill on this particular area. So I'm noticing she's a little bit tacky to the touch, so I'm gonna go ahead and add some more gel. So whenever you start to notice that your wand's not gliding as well, or that you just feel like you're getting almost stuck to the skin, that's when it is a really good time to add some more gel. The gel is also a conductor for the cold, so it's really gonna help you to reach those target temperatures, right? And so you can see I'm not really coming down near the knee at all. So that would almost be considered a secondary area. When we're dealing with the inner thighs, we're really sticking into the area that contains the most density. So that's going to be the area that's really, really at the top of the inner thigh. The best position for the client to be in for this treatment is on their back. We get a lot of questions about this. I always have them on their back, legs relaxed and extended, and spread apart so that you're able to reach and do the technique in this way.
Can you speak to why we don't go below -4?
Yes, so any extended application where the skin temperature is below -4 can lead really easily to extended periods of numbness and also raised irritations on the skin surface. The skin temperature just generally isn't meant to reach that low of a temp. And so you just have to be really cautious at that point. Again, the extended periods of numbness, they will go down, they will regain feeling. It's not a permanent nerve damage, but of course, client safety is our #1 concern, so we really just want to be really cautious there.
Can you clarify, there's some confusion on whether cryo takes place. There's thinking that it has to be -4 to -11, ideally -7, and there's
No, so anything under +4 degrees Celsius is going to create apoptosis in those fat cells. And actually the way that you're able to determine whether or not you've had a successful session is if you see that at least ½ inch loss, right, from before to after measurement. So that is really the determining factor, and the way that you're able to guarantee that you'll have at least a ½ inch loss is to make sure that you're in that -4 Celsius range. So it's anything under +4 as opposed to under -4. Of course, the more consistent you are with your temperature, meaning, of course, if you're that's hovering in the +4 range and isn't really steadily dropping, that obviously is not going to be necessarily as effective as a as a session that, you know, is consistently in the +2 to -4 range. But we say +4 as a marker just because it's easy to remember that +4 to -4, and anything under +4 consistently is going to be effective. Another thing that we've noticed that there's been some confusion about is how to hold the wand. So I'm gonna just quickly demonstrate that for you guys. So you guys can see here on the wand, right, the wand has this ergonomic shape. You want all of your fingers, including your thumb, to be tucked under that ergonomic curve, right? And so if you're holding the wand here, that's gonna damage this plastic connection cable. And if you've ever talked to George about a damaged wand, he'll sort of explain his points of contention with that. So really making sure that we're holding on to this wand, it won't damage the connection port or the hose. Again, if you're here, you're gonna put too much tension on the connection port, and actually it's designed ergonomically to make it a bit easier on your wrist. So it'll make it a little easier on your wrist as well as your fingers, and it'll just make a better experience overall.
Lee, can you speak to once you reach the desired temperature, how long you stay in that area of the body?
Yeah, so you can stay in an area of the body, and if it's at -4, you can stay until the session is complete. But the only concern is when you start to drop lower, in which case I would just say again what I said before, which is just to extend your gesture a little bit. So, you know, I'll do like a little demo here. Let's say I'm here, you know, I've been hovering here and I see that she's dropping into, you know, the -5 range. At that point, I would just kind of extend my gesture a bit more, so make these sort of broader sweeping motions. Maybe I would come down just a little bit further because she's reacting really well, right? So I might come down a little bit further to this part of the inner thigh. I wouldn't necessarily recommend switching to a different area entirely, but you can really be subtle about it, and you'll notice that, you know, it'll make a huge difference in the temperature.
How do you know the body's reacting well? Say that.
So because you can see on the temperature applicator graph what their temperature is, you'll be able to see whether or not they're cooling down quickly. So if any of you guys have done, for example, let's say a woman who's going through menopause, you'll know that it's extremely difficult to cool them down just because the body temperature is elevated in that hormonal state. And so in that case, you can see from the temperature graph that they have a lot of trouble reaching underneath that +4 marker, right? Whereas some people, again, are just gonna drop really quickly for whatever reason. Again, either they physiologically just run colder, or potentially it's because they have less mass, in which case you would just extend your gesture a little bit.
Great. We have a very specific question. We might have to follow up on this. Any success with men with gynecomastia?
So we are not able to slim the chest in men or in women, so really important as well that we understand that slimming over the breast glands is a strict contraindication in both sexes. However, having said that, there is a video on the box drive of a chest toning that can be used in those situations if a client comes in complaining of man boobs. So that is something we can use to approach that.
And for women, it's a kind of mini breast lift.
Yeah, and for women, it's a natural breast lift. So there's that as well. All right, so we've got about 2 minutes left on this cold cycle before we move into that secondary warming cycle. And then I'll demo for you guys the specific massage for this area. So the massage for this area, essentially any area other than the abdomen is gonna be pretty much the same, right? So when we do the circular motions in the direction of the nearest lymph, on the abdomen we're doing downward motions because the nearest lymph is in the groin. But actually for the inner thigh, because the nearest lymph is in the groin, it is an upward motion. So we'll do these upward counterclockwise motions, which I'll demonstrate as soon as we get to the massage.
So question, somebody joined the thing that like Slate that is asking a question that we actually haven't covered. Talk to us a little bit about the speed. They were wondering, they had been told to go even slower than this.
Yeah.
So talk a little about that.
That's a really good question. So it really does depend on the temperature that you're able to get them. So because she's at -1, I know that I don't necessarily need to go slower because she's really nicely in that target range. If I were to start to go even slower than this, I would see her drop really rapidly into that sort of -4, -5 period. And so adjusting my gesture just a little bit, a lot of this could also be because we're broadcasting over the internet. I've noticed that when I take videos of my technique, it actually appears a little bit faster than it really is. But really just adjust your speed based on the temperature that you're looking at in the live temperature graph. I can't stress enough how good of a tool that graph is to ensure that you're doing the sessions, the technique, everything effectively and properly. All right, so we're switching back to the warming sequence now. So again, we're just gonna do the same thing that we did for the initial heat sequence. We're just gonna make sure we're covering the entire area that we worked on with the cold. So I'm coming up all the way underneath. You can see there's a bit of redness there, totally normal. So that's one, again, of the really normal side effects from CRYOSKIN, especially in people with fairer skin types. So for the areas like the thighs and the arms, it's pretty common that you might not see the same amount of inch loss as you would on, say, the abdomen or the love handles. The reason for that, of course, is that in those situations with the abdomen and the love handles, there is much more skin to be sort of constricted. So there's a lot more to work with and there's more circumference to be lost. Whereas on the thighs and on the arms, particularly in a model like this that doesn't have all that much there, you'll see pretty much closer to about like a 1/2 inch to an inch per session.
Good question on the heat massage piece. Does it always need to be in a circular motion or can it be kind of back and forth?
So it doesn't necessarily always need to be in a circular motion. I find that's just the most soothing. But on the abdomen, of course, it would be, you know, this sort of back and forth. I just find it's a little tougher on the inner thigh area just because of the way that the body is curved. So I like to just do it in a way that's just the most comfortable for the client, which I've found is just this sort of back and forth, up and down motion on this particular area.
Okay, 2 further questions. So for the, like this is the first 12-minute session, right?
So on the 2.0, yes, it would be 12 minutes.
Okay.
On the 3.0, it is 2 minutes of heat, 13 minutes of cold, and 2 minutes of heat. So it's 17
okay, 17 minutes. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, for that session, the like how big of an area you would approach for those?
Yes, absolutely. So when I'm talking about an inner thigh slimming session, you can see here, hopefully you guys can see by the redness, I'm really talking about right up here in the inner thigh. So you can see as a reference point, this is where her knee is. And so I'm not even coming remotely close to the knee. I'm really sticking to this density of mass that's right here, right? So think about, you know, when people are coming in and wanting the thigh gap. So think about where that thigh gap would be, and that's sort of what you're looking at. Yeah, so it's basically about, it's a little smaller than this half sheet of paper. So it's probably about that large. And then what we're gonna do for the massage, so right, we're gonna start out just side to side. And remember with this massage, we're not going too deep, right? It's not meant to be any kind of deep tissue. It's really just meant to bring circulation back to the area. And so you'll just go side to side for about 60 seconds. And then we're gonna go ahead and do these upward circular motions, right? So I'm doing these counterclockwise motions upward towards the nearest lymph, which is the groin in this case.
We have another question just on one of the clients from Breaches Cryo has a pooch kind of below the belly button, right above whether or not that can be done in a slimming.
Yep,
you might want to mention the kind of risk of scars and stuff in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can definitely perform a slimming in that area. I've heard it's called the FUPA, but you can definitely do the slimming in that area. What I would suggest is, again, because it is a more sensitive area, also it tends to be the area where C-section scars will be present. So just making sure that there's no C-section scars present. Of course, if there are incision scars, we wouldn't be able to slim over that area. We would have to move around it. But let's say you're coming from this angle, what I would recommend doing is bringing the wand from above, right, and using your hand as a barrier just to make sure that you're not getting too close in a too sensitive of an area. So again, I would use that sort of opposing hand to really be your barrier to then create the curves and the hills in that direction, if that makes sense.
So a clarification, it is below a C-section scar and right above the leaf parts. Is that still, is that too small, or?
I would have to see a photo. So if you could send a photograph to training@cryofuel.com, even if you just send me a small diagram of how large the pouch is, it could be that in that situation, it might be more of a toning candidate versus a slimming candidate if the pouch is small enough. And I see here grapefruit, so, oh, it's big. Send me a photo. If you can send a photo to training@cryofuel.com, I'll be able to better assist you in that. Perfect. And so then I've just taken this fragrance-free baby wipe, and I'm just wiping off the excess here. So whenever I'm wiping off, just at the end of the session, I'm always doing it in a lifting motion. So really trying to seal in that lift of the skin. All right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my after measurement. I'm going to just take my measuring tape. 22. You were at 22 and a half.
No worries, I just wanted to make sure I had the right.
I'm right around the same area, and you can relax. Relax your leg. And now we're at 21 3/4. So we lost 3/4 of an inch, which again is pretty standard on the thigh area. So thanks so much for modeling. We're going to just turn our video off for a moment. We're going to get our arm model in here. If you guys do have any questions on the inner thigh slimming or anything in general, just put it into the chat and we'll go through those as we switch over our models.
A few more questions that I know have come up. Why can't we slim over scars? And is there any cases in which we can?
So that's a really good question. The thing is with incision scars is because the scar tissue that resides underneath them operates physiologically differently from subcutaneous fat cells. What tends to occur is that the scar tissue will actually recede inwards, whereas the fat will then pillow above it, and it creates sort of an unsightly pillowing of the fat. This happens in some cases, in some it does not. There's no real rhyme or reason. It doesn't really have anything to do with the age of the scar at all. So I tend to recommend avoiding them altogether because we really do want to avoid anything like that and sending clients out with anything unsightly. They're coming to us wanting us to help with reduction. We don't want to create a new issue. And I'm going to have you actually flip so that you're face down here. Kind of like a scarecrow arm. Yeah, I'll just put it over here. All right, perfect. And then, yep, and then I'll have you, if you can scoot over.
A few more questions on the scarring. Can you slim other areas that have scarring, and then if not, toning? Question on scars.
Yeah, absolutely. So it should be noted that you can slim over, you can slim around a scar, right? So when I say that you can't slim an incision scar, what I really mean is that you can't slim directly over it. But what you can do is go around it. Also, most typical scars are going to be C-section scars, and they're low enough that they tend not to present the most issues with slimming. Someone like George is a good example. He has an appendicitis scar right across his abdomen, but luckily the fat pocket actually is beneath it, so you're able to still work with it. I've worked with a few clients who have had, surgeries from birth or from childhood, where the scar does tend to be larger. In those cases, as long as you're not pulling directly over it with your gesture, But if you're coming from below or coming from above, typically it's fine. It's just really that pushing and pulling and creating apoptosis in the cell directly correlated to the scar tissue that tends to be an issue. However, with toning, it's totally fine. You can absolutely tone over any scars. Actually, to go back to the example with George, we've actually helped him to reduce not only the raised element of his scar, but also the discoloration. So
With toning.
With toning.
A specific question, and you might need to follow up on this, but the keloid type of scars, which I'm not familiar with, Keloid.
Oh, keloid scars? Yeah, so keloid scars are a little bit different just because they are a bit more, they're a bit more intensive, they're a bit more raised just generally. I wouldn't say that toning could completely dissipate them, although it should still be able to help. So I would say toning, again, still fine over that area. Slimming would be able to help reduce the size of the keloid though. All right, so now we're gonna start on the arms. If you need adjustment on the angle, just let us know. I know it is a little bit difficult to see. When I do have clients come in for arm slimming, I like to have them lay down almost in a scarecrow. So you can kind of see here, yeah, perfect. Oh, that's up. There we go. So you can see here that I have our model laying almost like a scarecrow. So they lay down on their stomach, I then put their arm out at an angle. It allows them to be supported here because that's sort of something you need when you have a lot of pressure going on here, but it also allows me to access the area that we're really going to be working with. And so same thing as I mentioned with the thighs, you want to just find a beauty mark that crosses over exactly where you're going to be dealing with, right? So we're going to come up from underneath. Yeah, perfect. And you can just relax the arm back down. So always making sure that when you're taking this initial measurement that you are getting them to completely relax, because you want to make sure you have constant measurement before and after. So this measurement right here, we're at about 12.5 inches around. I'm going to do the one arm just in the interest of time so that we can hopefully get to a lot of you guys' questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this fragrance-free baby wipe, right? I'm going to wipe off the air. It's going to be a little cold. Wipe off the area that I'm looking to treat. And really when I'm dealing with the arms, I'm only dealing in this area here, right? So you'll notice that when people do want to do arm slimming, generally they're focused on this area, the sort of pouch that comes right underneath, right? So we'll wipe off the surface area here. Then what I'm going to do, same thing as with the inner thigh slimming, I'm going to take a full pump of gel here, again about that much gel. On the 2.0, there is a specific setting, so arm, shoulder, chest slimming you would use on the 2.0. If you're using the 3.0, you're just going to use the arm slimming setting under the women's settings for a female client. We go into arm slimming and hit enter there. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the wand, and for this particular slimming, I like to be almost behind the client, right, so that I can really do it without having to drape over the nose. So go ahead and press play there. I'm going to deposit this gel, and I'm going to use the wand to glide it out. So I'm making sure that I'm heating across the entire area that I'm then going to be working on with the gold. You can, too, if desired, you can put a small bolster under the wrist of the client, depending on if they have, any shoulder issues. The arm is a trickier area to do. So definitely just anything you can do to make them more comfortable.
A question, I know we're not doing toning today, but a question on how the cellulite reduction is working, whether it's actually removing the cellulite or if it's the look of it, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely not removing the cellulite. So cellulite is something that is really poorly related to age and genetics. So instead what we're doing is we're reducing the appearance of cellulite significantly. So in the same way that toning is helpful for, helping with the appearance and the raised element of scarring, it's also helping with the cellulite and its appearance and the fact that it's bringing microcirculation to the area, it's helping to stimulate collagen and elastin production, all of which are very, very helpful in cellulite reduction. If you do have a client, however, who has cellulite in a fatty area or has a lot of dimpling, in so far as you're able to sort of pinch an inch of grippable fat, I recommend the best approach is alternating between slimming and toning sessions. So you would slim first, and then the week later you would tone. the same area. The following week, you would then do another slimming, and then the following week, you would tone again. All right, we've got about 10 seconds left on the heat sequence. We're about to transition into the cold here. All right, so that signifies our transition into the cold sequence. I'm gonna go ahead and add some gel here. And again, same way as I was doing on the inner thigh, right? I'm gonna use this edge of the arm, scoop and lift up, using my opposing hand to create that tension, right? So we're always trying to create these hills. Think of it as that pimple popping. I know it's a gross metaphor, but it's the best one to use. So think of your right hand or whatever hand that's holding the wand as almost like you're trying to scoop hard ice cream. So it's not a downward motion, but it is a scooping and lifting motion where it is operating with equal force to help and balance that out, create those hills. So really it's that pimple popping. And so you can see with the arm, because it is a smaller area, I'm moving stroke to stroke to stroke. So I really just move my strokes all the way to just above the elbow, right? So again, never getting the elbow involved in this. There's no fat around the elbow. It's gonna generally be localized on the bottom edge of the arm. And when they're laying like this, you can see that that fat is localized, right, to right where we need to sit.
There's a question which I answered in the chat, but I'll let you talk about it. When it's loose skin only, can you talk about how you would do that?
Yeah, so for loose skin only, the only approach to take is toning. And the reason why is that slimming is designed physiologically to target apoptosis in the subcutaneous fat cells. When you're dealing with loose skin, there isn't a real cluster of subcutaneous fat cells that you need to deal with. Instead, you're more dealing with promoting elasticity. You're dealing with a breakdown of collagen and elastin in the skin. And so in those cases, when it really is more so loose skin, and that's where you would determine that in your consultation process. So if you're pinching the skin and you don't feel any density and it feels instead really thin, somewhat pancakey, in those cases, a 5-pack of toning is always what I would recommend starting with.
And it's nothing to really apologize for. We found that people that have lost a lot of weight or done other techniques to lose the fat, the look of the skin is no better because there's that sagging. So it's a great, people like see great breakthrough results when they do the toning because it actually gets the elasticity back.
100%. And actually, I just uploaded this morning onto the box drive. I've started creating a new series of before and afters exclusive to toning, so with no slimming sessions in between. So in the before and after folder under toning, there's a new folder called Before and Afters 2019, and we'll be following those before and afters from week 1 through week 5. So just posted the week 1 photos, and I'll be posting them weekly as I photograph them. So feel free to use that because I think sometimes people hear slimming and, you know, it is this sort of exciting buzzword, but it's not appropriate for all people because some people are really just dealing with loose skin as opposed to excess fat. Add some more gel here for her. She's getting a little tacky to the touch. You can see here, I'm really using this sort of knife edge of my right or left thumb. You can also feel free to use that knife edge of your left pointer finger. I always prefer to use the knife edge of my hands as opposed to just my hands flat because you get so much more tension that way. You're able to really scoop and lift in a way that's not taxing and in a way that doesn't feel so clunky for the client.
question about how cold the skin should stay in toning.
So in toning, the exact temperature range is less of a concern as the actual application of technique. Having said that, it is important that for any toning session, you are in single digits. So that is going to be generally, you'll range from -2 to, +8 or so. But as long as you're in single digits, because as you guys know with the toning technique, you're lifting the wand up at every stroke, you are going to have more trouble cooling down the skin consistently. If you do have a client that you're not able to cool down into single digits, I would just really recommend going really slow, applying a bit more pressure on your strokes, and really making sure that you can get them down into that single digit range.
There's a question about a manual. We do have a training manual and a machine care manual that comes out. There's always opportunities for improvement in making that even more specific. But for the person that asked in the chat, if you do not have one of those, we can send you a PDF. It also is in the box folders.
Yeah, so I will say that we do update the box quite frequently. Generally, when we do, we send it out in the weekly email, but really, if there's anything that you're looking for, search is really your friend in the box. I know it can get overwhelming because there are just so many assets in there, but especially for training, the video archive is so helpful. I'm always adding new videos to that. We also have all of these webinars recorded, so any webinar that you've missed or you want to review again is accessible to you on the box. So please do let support@cryofuel.com know if you do not have box access, because we'll definitely add you to it. It's just such a wealth of resources.
And if anybody from your team needs access, it's available to anybody that you work with. On the manual, if you just search for manual or training manual, it'll pop up. And we have updated it recently, and it has quite a bit on the different techniques in there. A good question for somebody that has larger weight loss goals. Okay. Would you recommend doing slimming every 2 weeks, or would you recommend modulating between slimming 1 week and toning the following week?
So it really just depends on the individual client. So if you're dealing with a client that has a significant amount of extra weight, but also has a significant amount of looseness in the skin or excess skin that they're dealing with, that's a case where I would say slimming and toning is most appropriate. If you just have someone who has excess weight but has a fairly good elasticity of the skin, it's pretty typical in younger clients, then I would say starting with the slimming and then using the toning as it becomes needed as the skin, needs a little bit more firmness, a little bit more tone as the weight loss goes on.
A couple more questions. So is there a different technique or a different setting that you use for people that have the hard fat and higher cortisol levels where it's harder to remove?
It's a really good question. So we definitely can work with those clients who have a little bit more fibrous fat. In those cases, again, I don't really recommend ever doing the 40-minute slimming on a first-time client. But if you do have a client who comes in that you've treated maybe once or twice that does have that more fibrous fat, a 40-minute slimming session is pretty appropriate in those cases. In terms of technique, you just really have to switch it up. So it's a lot slower. It's a lot slower. It's a lot more pressure. It's very laborious on the technician. So definitely make sure you're sort of doing your exercises before you approach a client of that type. But certainly worth it. They will see results. They just typically will see results a little bit slower than other clients. So in that case, managing expectations is really appropriate.
A couple other questions. So one, they know that you're doing slimming today and not toning. could you show maybe at the end just a few toning strokes if you were doing
Sure.
toning on the arm?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we have about 20 seconds left in the cold cycle of this arm. And then what I'll do for you just with the machine off, I'll demonstrate how I would do toning if I were to do the arm. Just a quick note, we had some confusion on this from our butt lift webinar, but toning and slimming should never be performed in the same area on the same day. So if you are going to do toning and slimming on the same area, I highly recommend following the following scheduling for that. So I would do slimming week 1, toning week 2, slimming week 3, toning week 4. Great opportunity for a 10-pack there. But just gives the body enough time to sort of stimulate that collagen and elastin, gives apoptosis enough time to ramp up the system. If you're just going to do slimming and toning in the same day on the same area, it's a bit of an overkill, and it's just not best practice. So I would really avoid that.
And you also just see incredible results when you're doing slimming. It gets rid of the fat, and then the next week toning, it tightens up around it. So it really allows the body to kind of process it best. Another question on somebody wants to do arms, and they are a slimming candidate for arms, but they've got some shoulder mobility issues. Is there any other way to kind of manage around that, or is that something you could follow up?
I mean, in that case, you really just are going to have to go off of how they're able to sit with your technique in mind. So, if you need to have them sitting in a chair, that's fine. You have to have sort of putting their arm just out to the side, that's fine as well. Really, in that case, I'm not really dogmatic about exactly how they're laying. This typically is the best way, but for people who do have those sort of shoulder mobility issues, or any other issues of the arm or elbow, sometimes it's just necessary to make adjustments for them. So however they feel comfortable, where you can adequately reach the area is fine by me.
There's a question on a client that wants to treat multiple areas and they buy a 5-pack. Would you have them buy a 5-pack for a certain area or modulate between, or do you want to talk a little bit about how you see the progress?
That's a really great question. So I highly can't recommend enough that when you have a client who comes in that is looking for multiple areas of treatment, and I'm speaking specifically to slimming on this point, so I'll touch on toning a bit after. So let's say you have a client come in, they are concerned with, fat in the arms, fat in the abdomen, and fat in the inner thighs. So let's say those are, that's our 3 examples. I would highly, highly recommend that they focus on one area first, right? So when they get their first 5-pack, what they should do is really focus the first 5 sessions on their biggest problem area, right? So they can determine what that is, but see that area to fruition, see it to resolution, and then from there, move on to the next area. Because the issue becomes when you're doing, the first week slimming on the abdomen, 2 weeks later you're slimming the arms, and then 2 weeks later you're slimming the inner thighs. You lose that localized metabolism, you lose that momentum. Physiologically, you'll still see results, but the results for each area are going to be slower. So we would rather see quicker results on one area so that the client's incentivized to come back for the others.
Exactly, and then you can talk to the client about, we're going to do a 5-pack. If your body responds really well and we're happy with the results on, let's say, the stomach, then we might have a few sessions left to do the arms.
100%.
But, everybody's body reacts a bit differently, and you can work with them on that. An important question that we often get on all of these is, can you ever slim 2 body parts in one session?
The answer on that is no. Yeah, so you can never slim in one session. It's a big no. It just produces cellular debris that then can bottleneck in the system. Obviously, we don't want to run the risk of overloading, the kidneys, the liver, the lymphatic system. We're just very overly cautious about this, but it's also from a client results standpoint. You want your clients to see the best results, and so we want to make sure that we're really spacing it out so that they're able to do so. Go back down.
A question on, similar question, but is it ever okay? Okay.
So yeah, we lost a ½ inch again on the arms. ½ inch is generally pretty much what you'll lose unless you're dealing with a larger mass. So the results in slimming on this area are going to be mostly aesthetically based. So you will really see an aesthetic change versus a really high inch loss per se. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to show your beautiful face, Delaney, now that we're moving on to the question part. if they're doing butt, so there's a question on slimming and toning. So let's say you wanted to slim around a buttocks area, but then tone around an upper thigh, but you're not covering, my understanding of the question is like you're not covering the same piece of skin twice. Would you?
Well, so I don't, generally speaking, I don't recommend slimming the buttocks themselves. They tend to be more muscular. There's not a lot of interval, subcutaneous fat in that area, and you're good to go. Yes. Thank you for volunteering. So I typically recommend not slimming the buttocks themselves, instead slimming the band underneath the butt cheek. Again, I'm learning all this new slang, but the banana hammock, right? So I recommend focusing your slimming efforts on that area and then toning the butt itself for that lift and that reduction of cellulite on the actual butt cheek. But, you know, I would recommend really best practice for the Brazilian butt lift is going to be, alternating between slimming and toning. Because when you're doing the butt toning, you don't just want to focus on that area, you do want to come up over the butt itself. So best practice is really just to alternate between the two.
Okay. How about slimming on the stomach and toning on the legs in the same day?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I always say really like a best practice for building out sort of that kind of packaging is to do, you know, slimming on the stomach for excess fat and for circumference reduction, and then, you know, potentially toning on the backs of the thighs for cellulite. You could do a butt lift toning session in the same day as a stomach slimming. You could do a facial toning. The results are really endless with combining toning with slimming, just not on the same area that you slimmed. So you do have a lot of options there in terms of how to package that out.
Perfect. I just forgot the question here. Hold on.
No, you're fine.
Do you calculate the BMI yourself or ask the client?
So in terms of BMI, I don't, I'm not super stringent on it in the same way that, you know, I tend to just use it as a reference point. So as you guys know from the webinar that we had with Dora talking about, you know, her larger clients, it's not super dogmatic. We're not super strict about it. In that sense, it's really just about managing expectations. And as you perform these sessions, you start to get really good at sort of seeing who is going to respond more quickly, seeing who is going to maybe take a little bit more time. In those cases, again, like, you know, if you have somebody coming in who's measuring, you know, 45 inches around the waist, you know that they'll probably need more than 5 sessions. Because in that case, generally that would be somebody who has more of like a 35 pushing BMI. So I really just use it as a reference point. Again, I'm not going to reject somebody who has, you know, a 36 or 37 BMI. I just kind of take it, you know, as a reference point.
Okay. Question on someone. Sorry. Okay. Could you do a toning session on someone's back or love handle and back fat under shoulder blade or the bra area?
So I see these as 2 different areas. So for example, if somebody comes into me for you know, slimming around the midsection, right? So I would probably do, depending on their measurement, I would do, you know, lower abdomen for the first half and then love handles for the second half, or, you know, let's say they're larger, I might do first half on the right side and second half on the left side. But, you know, I typically see the front underbra fat and the back fat as being a connected area. So if you're gonna do that area, I would recommend using the arm slimming setting because it is less in density than the left handles, which is the reason why I tend to not recommend combining the 2. But definitely something they can do on another slimming session. I just typically wouldn't recommend doing it on the same as this area. Even if you're breaking it up in timing, it's just density is different. So you want to really focus on the localized area.
Any other questions? Okay, question on would you ever use it for anything beyond beauty, like overcoming
Really good question. question. So we do have a pain setting on the machine. The issue is that of course the CRYOSKIN is not FDA approved, so we can't market this. Makes it really hard for pricing, makes it really hard for reporting. You know, we do have that setting that we are able to give out. It is a 5-minute setting, so again, really, really hard to charge for, and we cannot market any clear medical benefits on the device. So we do have that. You can feel free to call George if you'd like to add it to your machine, but it is a really, really tough sell because typically we recommend pricing it at about $100, and for 5 minutes, it's not, you know, the easiest, especially when you can't market.
There was a private question about doing a double chin setting and a facial on the same day. I answered privately, but it is best practice actually, because double chin setting, doing slimming and adding the value of a facial is a great way to kind of add value to the double chin slimming session.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, you're not going over the...
Yeah, exactly. So I'll just touch on that a little bit. If you did want to do that, so let's say you're having trouble selling out double chin slimming sessions, because of course it is an abbreviated, you know, 15-minute slimming session versus, you know, the more traditional 30 to 37-minute. In that case, I do recommend that you can, of course, add sort of like an abbreviated or half facial to a double chin slimming. So the only thing is that when you're doing that, make sure that you don't go over the neck or the chin area that you just slimmed. Make sure you're just toning on the face itself. So that's my only recommendation. But as Molly said, it's great to add some value to that double chin session. So you wouldn't, just to clarify, you wouldn't charge them twice. You would just charge them the one session cost, so the $250 or $350.
How much do you charge for the pain setting?
So this is a tricky one. You know, of course, like I said before, and I can't stress it enough, we cannot market this setting. We are not FDA approved, so we cannot market any clear medical benefits to the device, but $100 is typically what we recommend, what Simon has recommended. You know, again, it is a really tough sell. It is a 5-minute session. So, you know, you kind of just have to work with it as it is. Some people just like incorporate it into something else. But yeah, we typically recommend $100.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about before and afters that we have on cellulite, what we did the before and after photos under training?
Yes, so we do have a few in the before and afters folder. I mean, definitely we need more, so I am working on getting more of those in there. So they would be under the toning settings. So we've also had a little bit of confusion on whether or not the cellulite is actually a different setting. It's not. So the best practice for approaching cellulite is going to be through toning. Having said that, of course, if you know they are presenting with cellulite in a fatty area, or they're presenting with quite a bit of dimpling, you would want to do alternating slimming and toning. But there's no separate cellulite setting. It's just would be a toning session. There's no separate cellulite technique. It's just the same toning technique and the same slimming technique if you're incorporating that as well.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Go ahead, you can go ahead and wrap it up. Oh, sorry, there's a question on contraindications for Botox and fillers.
Yep, so for the facial, the contraindication for Botox, we ask for a minimum 30-day waiting period between receiving the Botox injection, getting the CRYOSKIN facial. Reason for that is that it can interact with those injections. So we want to make sure that if they have had Botox done, they're really getting, you know, obviously the most bang for their buck, but also that we're not disrupting any of those injections. For fillers, slightly different because there's actually something in that subcutaneous layer. And so for fillers, we say 90 days. So a minimum of 3-month waiting period between receiving fillers and receiving a CRYOSKIN facial. So typically fillers would be, you know, cheek fillers, you know, brow fillers, lip fillers, chin, sometimes fillers. In those cases, also there are sometimes fillers in the body. Same rule applies for 90 days for fillers.
And how about liposuction, doing toning on liposuction? Can you do it and how long to wait?
That's a really good question. So if anybody has had, if you have any clients who have had lipo or have had tummy tuck, you typically cannot slim over that area, hardly ever, because the fat will either have been cut out or, with liposuctioned out. In those cases, typically what will happen is the fat will displace elsewhere, so you would be able to slim generally like the love handle area. You can tone over it though, so that's typically what I'll do if I have a client who comes in who has had a tummy tuck or lipo done. You do have to wait until they're fully healed from it. So typically it does take a few months because it is a more invasive procedure. But what I tend to do in those situations is I'll do, half a toning session on the front because there's nothing to slim there, and then half of a slimming session on the back because typically they won't have enough fat on the back to warrant full slimming on the back, but they'll have just enough that you can kind of split it half and half like that, and just charge it out as one session. All right, perfect. So yeah, that was the demo for the inner thigh slimming and the arm slimming. We also have these videos online on the box drive under the training materials, staff training, and then the training videos folder. I have recently organized it, so you will be able to find videos for slimming, for toning, and for facial separately in separate folders now. Again, if anybody is having issues or has any general questions, we did recently launch our support network. So you guys can send an email to support@cryofuel.com, or you guys can also check our knowledge base, which is based on FreshDesk. So if you guys have any questions, or if you guys need access to the box, just send an email to support@cryofuel, and we'll be able to help you guys out that way.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.